and welcome to another episode of The Clever Dev. What we're going to do today is we're going to really customize the styling on a data grid. So I've already got a basic data grid set up, and I'll get into why this first row is blue. But we'll talk about things like setting row background color. I'm going to do it on alternating rows because that requires kind of an interesting selector. We'll talk about using render cell to align the cell contents. And there's a simpler way to align cell contents that I'll show you also, but render cell is useful for doing pretty much any kind of customization that you'd like to do to a cell, to really a column. We'll also hit some basics like column width, row height, and then I'll show you a failed attempt to customize an individual row height instead of setting all row heights to be the same. Kind of messed with some of the internal data grid logic that's kind of default in there that Material-UI places. So with that said, there will be additional resources and code links. The full code is available in the show notes or in the video details section, so just expand that to find the additional resources. If you would consider subscribing, it really motivates me. I appreciate it. And also in the video details section, there is a link to a Material-UI course on Udemy. I did not create it, but someone actually put together 40 plus hours of content on Material-UI, and it's really highly rated. It's bounces between 4.6 and 4.7 stars, and it's got about 9,000 reviews as of recording this. So definitely worth checking out. So with that said, let's take a look at the code. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the row background color. And so I've already got some code set up in here just to save us some time. And we're going to skip this here for a little bit and just go straight into the row background color. The row background color, it requires kind of an interesting selector, but if you dig into Material-UI then in DevTools, then you can, oops, not that one, you can get all the selectors that you need. So let's open DevTools and take a look at some of this. So we're seeing class, Material-UI data cell. Let's see what else we see in here. It can't be hard, of course, selecting the row that you want, but here we go. So MUI DataGrid row, I think we'll end up using that one. And I think I'll actually hit a wrapping class that I'm familiar with, so we can make sure and target our classes properly and have some good specificity. So let's go into our code here. So right now I'm going to add a selector to the root class here. It's going to be a child of the root class, or inside the root class. A subselector, I guess you could say, of the root class. So let's get that in there. So I mentioned that we're going to target a wrapping class. And I already did some research on it. I'm aware that that is called Material-UI DataGrid, or MUI DataGrid rendering zone. So that'll just give us some specificity. Let's keep drilling down here. So we looked at the .MUI DataGrid row. And if you ever see a selector and you try to select it, but you're unable to get the styling applied that you'd like to, then it's always a good idea to try to add some specificity with just some more classes that are auto-generated by Material-UI. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use an nth child to get every other row. So I'm going to use the 2n, a pretty simple one right there. Sometimes the syntax for it can be kind of tricky, but I'll show you the one above in a little bit. That one had some tricky syntax for sure. So there we go. Let's take a look at that now. And it's a little bit unhappy. Looks like I forgot a colon there. Take a moment. There we go. There we go. So now we see I've got kind of this grayish color with some opacity to it. And so when you know the selectors, it's actually pretty straightforward to try and select a Material-UI component. In this case, all the cells in that row. So let's look at this selector since I mentioned it a couple times. So here I was looking at custom attributes, data-row index, row, and then I did this selector int of type 5n-4. So what that did is it actually added this blue styling, or it selected the first row on each of these pages, because each page has 5 elements. So I said do every fifth -4, so it's like the first, the sixth, and so on. I gave it color blue and font size 18. And then I actually tried to set individual row height using this logic here. So I did successfully, in a manner of speaking. It's a little hard to tell here because I haven't added row height to the other rows yet. But anyway, it was risky. I wouldn't trust it to, like, I wouldn't put this code in production because you never know how internal Material-UI styling is going to interact with something super custom like this. So anyway, with that said, let's move on to the next styling I want to talk about. Let's look at aligning cell contents using the render cell to do an alignment. And then we'll talk about a simpler option because it's actually an available prop. So first we'll do it via render cell. So in this case, I'm going to add in render cell. So a render cell is basically just like injecting a custom cell. And the syntax is you pass in available values so you can print, you can have it display whatever text you want. I'm just doing something simple. I've just got a div, but you could put whatever Material-UI component in here that you wanted to. So here's part of the power of it, is I'm just going to add some inline styling. And let's say some font size. Make it 18, make it nice and big so we can see which one. Make it pop so that we can easily see which one we've aligned center. And then the thing that we actually care about, the text align. And we can do center, we can do right. I'll probably end up right aligning it actually, because then it'll be in line with other text-based cells. Actually, left align would be in line with text-based cells, my mistake. Anyway, so we can see it was this first column here. It's nicely right aligned. We got the blue text made a little larger. So that is one simple way. I've got the center on it there. So that's one simple way. And it can be a little bit hard to tell that it actually is center aligned here. Just because the text up here, there's hidden icons that only show when you hover over. Let's put on a right align just to see the difference there. There we go. See it bump over like that. So for now, I'll just leave it right aligned. So there's actually a prop for it. You might be wondering why I did it like that when there's simply a prop. But it was more about showing that you can really customize the cells in a data grid any way you want to. So just setting them as a div, injecting a div with whatever styling you want, that's a simple way to be able to add whatever styling you care about. So anyway, like I mentioned, the prop is simply align and then whatever direction. So those are kind of the two more complex things that I wanted to touch on. Let's hit some basics here. We're going to set width for this column. And can't forget our comma up here. So something simple like that with 100. See what that looks like. Give it a moment. There we go. And there wasn't really any visual difference because they were already left aligned and the width was about the same. So if we want to set a row height, then we actually do that at the data grid level. So let's say 200. See what that looks like. Oh, too big. Let's say 50. Too small. Let's say 100. Alright, so you can really see now the difference in this first row that I set a custom height to compared to all the other rows. Let's look over on the next page, make sure that that is still holding true, that I was right about that. So yeah, that looks good. All right. So I already mentioned the individual row height. Really, you can do tons of different kinds of styling. Even though I wouldn't necessarily suggest targeting row height, you can use these selectors and these custom attributes here that I've used to, and those custom attributes are found just look at, open up DevTools and select one of the elements in the data grid, and you'll see some of these custom attributes. So anyway, but it can be used to do color or background color for individual rows or cells or all kinds of things. So a lot of value in knowing the Material UI styling system, and a lot of value in just being willing to open up DevTools, see the classes that are applied by default by Material UI, and being willing to use those to really get some granular styling. So this concept that I did here is really applicable to any Material UI component, and tables and grids, of course, as well as data grids. You can use this in the child logic to customize individual rows. So with that said, then I hope that this was useful. It's been super helpful to me just to have a deeper understanding of the styling system, but in particular being able to style data grids exactly as I want them. And I really, other than using these styling classes that are in Material UI by default, I also really suggest that you dig into this render cell concept. So like I mentioned, the full code for this is in the video details, so just expand that, and it's actually got a code sandbox link with this running in it.